The Ecuadorian government denounces a coup plot coinciding with Thursday's protest. The plan would include the blockade of airports and bridges located on the borders. Plus, at least 36 people die after a ferry capsizes in the Philippines. The vessel was carrying 189 people. And the United States sent Switzerland extradition requests for 7 soccer officials arrested in May in relation to the FIFA scandal. And good morning, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. To begin today, as we said there in Ecuador, where the government has denounced a plan for a coup d'etat coinciding with Thursday's protests. Now, the plan would include the blockade of the airports of the capital of Quito and the city of Guayaquil and the bridges located on the Colombian and Peruvian borders, while enclosing the Palace of Government. Now, according to evidence collected by intelligence groups, assault forces would also support frontline protesters in this plan. Government ministers have accused some opposition lawmakers of coordinating a strategy with former Colonel Mario Pazmiño in order to cause chaos during the protests, their aim being to undermine stability as the country readies for the arrival of Pope Francis on Sunday. Now, the plan would also have included the publication of 2 letters in the national newspapers El Universo and La Hora, and sending letters to the Pope seeking to undermine his visit.
We cannot, nor should we permit in our country that we're trying to build this style of politics. This is a government that has been democratically elected with a wide majority, and any such action ought to be rejected by all Ecuadorians.
The United States and Cuba have taken a large step towards the reestablishment of former relations. Our correspondent now, Bianca Perez, with the details in Washington.
President of the United States, Barack Obama, announced Wednesday that his country and Cuba have solidified a deal to open embassies in each other's capitals. This grand step, which will help normalize relations between the two nations, comes after half a decade of isolation from the U.S. towards the island nation.
For the United States, that meant clinging to a policy that was not working. Instead of supporting democracy and opportunity for the Cuban people, our efforts to isolate Cuba, despite good intentions, increasingly had the opposite effect.
While both countries prepare themselves for the opening of the embassies, there are still many topics that need to be discussed and issues that need to be resolved in order to obtain full normalized relations, such as the closure of Guantanamo Bay and the end of the embargo.
So there are a whole series of steps, things that we need to do to further normalize relations. But it's much easier to do once you have an embassy and you can have a full dialogue.
While a large majority sees this as a way to move forward, Republicans like Speaker of the House John Boehner see this as a mistake, citing that relations should not be normalized until all Cuban people enjoy their freedom. Despite the negative statements, President Obama sees this as a gateway that will eventually lead to lifting the embargo that is currently in place.
I've called on Congress to take steps to lift the embargo that prevents Americans from traveling or doing business in Cuba. We've already seen members from both parties begin that work. After all, why should Washington stand in the way of our own people?
Though this has been a grand step for the foreign relations of both countries, the truly monumental day will be on July 20th, when the Cuban flag is raised here, just a few blocks away from the White House. Bianca Perez, Telesur, Washington, D.C.
And we go to Mexico now. That's where the son of a drug lord has been rearrested a few hours after being freed due to lack of evidence. 25-year-old Ruben Oseguera, also known as El Menchito, was detained just a week ago over allegations of being the second in command of the Jalisco New Generation drug cartel. He was freed Wednesday by federal court in the central state of Mexico, which claimed the authorities failed to prove his links to the gang. Following prosecutors appealing, officers waited for Oseguera outside the Almoyoya prison to rearrest him, this time over his presumed participation in the disappearance of 2 people. El Menchito had already been arrested in January 2014 and freed a year later due to lack of evidence. His second freeing provoked new clashes between the government and judges. Around the world, we head again to Greece. That's where Greeks are worried about the political situation 3 days before a referendum on whether the country should accept creditors' demand. Meanwhile, polls show the gaps between the yes and no vote are narrowing. More on that in our World News segment.
One day after Greece became the first developed economy to default on debt to the IMF, there were long lines at cash machines with people trying to withdraw the money they are allowed. With Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras clinging to the referendum as a weapon to negotiate, Eurozone finance ministers said there are no grounds for further talks until after Sunday's vote. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro has expressed solidarity with Greece and Tsipras, encouraging the country to break ties with the IMF.
From the land of Bolivar and Chavez, we express our solidarity and support to the people of Greece that is battling for its new independence, the right to life and development, and also to live with dignity. They want to end Greece's hope and kneel down their people. The International Monetary Fund wants to bring them down.
Two former Khmer Rouge leaders have launched appeals of their convictions by a UN-backed tribunal that sentenced them to life in prison for their roles during the group's brutal era. They are convicted for taking part in the forced evacuations, murders, and execution of Cambodians in the 1970s killing fields revolution. Although the majority of Cambodians alive now were born after the bloody era, many students and survivors gathered to listen to the hearing. Between 1.7 million and 2.2 million people are believed to have died under the Khmer Rouge regime. At least 36 people have died after a ferry capsized in Philippines carrying 189 between passengers and crew. Fortunately, 118 have survived. Huge waves battered the Mevdia Kim Nirvana, bound for Camotes Island in central Cebu province from the port of Ormoc. The Coast Guard said hundreds of people died each year in ferry accidents in the Philippines, an archipelago of 7,100 islands with a notoriously poor record for maritime safety. Overcrowding is common and many of the vessels are in bad condition. Oregon has become the fourth state in the U.S. to allow the recreational use of marijuana. It will be permitted for people aged 21 and up. Oregon follows the step of Colorado, Washington State, and Alaska. While pot remains illegal under federal law, at least 23 states have allowed it for medical use, and many other states are considering legalization. 14 more U.S. states will legalize recreational marijuana by 2020, according to a recent report.
We go back to the FIFA scandal now. The United States has sent Switzerland extradition requests for 7 soccer officials who were arrested in May on suspicion of racketeering in a corruption probe. The officials have been jailed around the Zurich region since they were arrested in a luxury hotel 2 days before FIFA's annual Congress. The Swiss Federal Office of Justice will grant their lawyers 14 days to respond to the request. This may be extended by a further 14 days. And in the Women's Soccer World Championship, current champion Japan beat England 2-1 and will now play the United States in the final on July 5th in Vancouver. The Japanese won the semifinal thanks to an own goal from England defender Laura Bassett. The U.S. booked their ticket to the final with a 2-0 win over top-ranked Germany on Tuesday. And finally, this morning, billionaire reality show star and Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump says he has filed a $500 million lawsuit against Univision over the network's decision to end its contract to broadcast the Miss USA pageant. The resolution comes after the Republican candidate's remarks insulting Mexican immigrants when he announced his candidacy for president. Trump considered the move by Univision a thinly veiled attempt to stifle his freedom of speech in order to boost Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton. Those are his thoughts. Plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great day. We'll see you right back here in just a few hours.